Dramatic testimony this morning in Washington by Christine Ford, talking about her allegations that Brett Kavanaugh attempted to rape her when they were both in high school. Kavanaugh has denied it strongly, calling it plain and simply a smear. He says it never happened. I'm joined now by two experts in the area of prosecuting sex crimes, Julie Rendelman and Kenney Baden. Thank you very much for being here. What did you make of the witness, Julie?
I think she's holding her own, which I don't think any of us are very surprised about it. This is a doctor who experienced a horrifying experience all those years ago, and to be frank, and maybe anyone disagrees, I don't think the prosecutor is making much headway with regards to going after anything in terms of her credibility.
Is she credible in the?
Yeah, having prosecuted sex crimes. Having listened to my girlfriends who've been sex assaulted, having watched my cousin in a brutal rape situation testify, let me tell you, I was about to cry this morning, as were my office. I think the feeling you get from her is she's absolutely credible. Now, what this committee does with that, I don't know, but she's credible.
In terms of her testimony, she also appears to be very vulnerable and is very forthcoming about what she does and doesn't know, discussing gaps in her memory and lots of questions about that. Julie, is that helping her, or is that?
Absolutely. Well, we think about it, one of the comments that was made is, when someone's going to lie, they're going to remember every single detail. And when they remember every single detail from 35, 36 years ago, you don't find them credible. She's not like that. She's actually forthcoming when it comes to not only the things she remembers and remembers quite brilliantly, but those things that she can't recall. And so that, to me, lends credibility to her.
And absolutely. And again, when you deal with sex crimes victims, and some of these senators clearly have not dealt with sex crimes victims, they don't remember everything. They just remember the brutality of the assault. Sometimes they can remember the face. Sometimes they can't even remember the face of their assailant. It's just the brutality and the effect it has on them. And let me tell you, people that have been sexually assaulted at 2 years old can remember they've been assaulted. They may not remember why, who, exactly what it did, but they know that there's something wrong.
However, keep in mind, though, she's not saying anyone assaulted her. She's saying Brett Kavanaugh assaulted her, and she's very specific and clear, because remember, there's two people that came forward recently that said, oh, it was me that did it, and there was actually an attempt to have someone else indicate that, and she said it's not that.
I can't wait till the handcuffs come on those two people.
Senator Richard Durbin put that very question to her, relating that Republicans had come up with two people who they say claimed they were the ones who assaulted her. And here is what Senator Durbin said as he asked that to Christine Ford.
I'm asking you to address this new defense of mistaken identity directly. Dr. Ford, with what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%.
100%.
100% certain. Is that too certain?
No, because, this is clearly a searing event in her mind. She has lived with this event. She knows, there's certain things she knows, and that much she knows.
You have to keep in mind, I think what people tend to forget is this is not a criminal proceeding.
That's right.
And so she doesn't have to, the prosecutor doesn't have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. The issue is whether or not there's sufficient evidence to establish, by the way, not even that he necessarily even did the most serious of events, but that he did that of which makes him not qualified to sit permanently as a Supreme Court nominee.
You see, the problem is he denied everything. It's a blanket denial. I wasn't there. I didn't do it. I don't drink. I never drank. I wasn't like that. I wasn't a student like that. That leads to, hey, wait a second. We all have things in our past that we can admit to that we're not too proud of, right? Including, people in high school who drank a lot. I watched them. You watched them, right?
Well, his yearbook talks about that. He's part of the 100 Kegs Club, 100 Kegs or Bust. He talks about, with his buddy Mark Judge, who was supposedly also there, extensive drinking. We saw his calendar release, talks about Beach Week and, sort of alcohol-soaked weeks as a high school senior. Now, that happens in a lot of cases, but he initially presented himself as somewhat of a choir boy, most interested in sort of pursuing academics and science projects.
Yeah, and I think that's where he failed, which I think we always say as lawyers, when we have a client, keep your mouth shut, because those things that you think are going to help you are going to bite you in the you-know-what eventually. And that's what happened here, because he went on Fox News and talked about what a choir boy he was, that he barely drank, and now it's biting him. And so it makes no sense for him to come out.
And Julie and I remember, because we've been trying cases for a little bit more than like a year, when it was a good thing to have like things like priests testify for you because they were honorable. Now we know that there are victims from the priests who were abusing kids for years, and those kids never came forward. But if you listen to some of those victims now, just like you're listening to her, it's like, oh my God.
There were no tears from her part, but there was emotion. You could hear it in her voice. And at one point, Senator Patrick Leahy, a Democrat from Vermont, asked her what was the most searing memory. And this is what that transaction took place. We're back with a special report here on the Law and Crime Network. The Senate hearing for the testimony of Christine Ford about Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh is in a lunch break, and we'll pick it up as soon as they resume. But we're going to talk now about the role of the sex crime prosecutor, Rachel Mitchell from Arizona, who the Republicans have hired to do the questioning for them. Why do you think they did that?
My simple answer, and perhaps I'm, a little, distrusting, is I think that it was all men, and they thought that if they used a woman, it would come off better.
The optics.
The optics
So
were perfect for them. Right. I don't think it's working for them. I think they didn't take into consideration the fact that these 5-minute breaks would break up her ability to cross-examine, and she's not really able to make any headway because of that.
The Senate rules allow each senator 5 minutes, so she gets 5 minutes, and then to a Democratic senator, then back to Rachel Mitchell. She can't get up ahead of steam, can she?
She can't get up ahead of steam, but she's got to be careful. Remember, she is a sex crimes prosecutor. She has to go back to doing what she's doing unless she's been promised something else, and get the trust of victims who have been assaulted, who have been raped, who have been abused by whether it's male victims or female victims, and she can't do that if she looks like she's attacking this woman, if she looks like she's attacking Dr. Ford. So she has a fine line here, and also, quite frankly, I mean, they called her a female assistant yesterday. She's more than that. She is a lawyer. She's a fine lawyer with fine credentials. I would have quit if somebody called me a female assistant.
Well, she has been sort of dancing around tough questions, trying to raise questions about Ms. Ford's memory.
Right.
What actually happened, inconsistencies in her story. And here's one excerpt where she talked about how she got home from that party.
I don't think it's working for them. I think they didn't take into consideration the fact that these 5-minute breaks would break up her ability to cross-examine, and she's not really able to make any headway because of that.
The Senate rules allow each senator 5 minutes, so she gets 5 minutes, and then to a Democratic senator, then back to Rachel Mitchell. She can't get up ahead of steam, can she?
She can't get up ahead of steam, but she's got to be careful. Remember, she is a sex crime prosecutor. She has to go back to doing what she's doing unless she's been promised something else, and get the trust of victims who have been assaulted, who have been raped, who have been abused by whether it's male victims or female victims, and she can't do that if she looks like she's attacking this woman, if she looks like she's attacking Dr. Ford. So she has a fine line here, and also, quite frankly, I mean, they called her a female assistant yesterday. She's more than that. She is a lawyer. She's a fine lawyer with fine credentials. I would have quit if somebody called me a female assistant.
Well, she has been sort of dancing around tough questions. So Rachel Mitchell has been questioning inconsistencies in her stories. There were 3 boys there. There were 4 boys there. Is she getting anywhere with any of that, do you think?
She's getting nowhere with it, because this is not a courtroom. It's not a cross-examination. And quite frankly, if it was, Brian, there are 8 out of the 11 representatives, Republicans, who are lawyers. I mean, there was a JAG representative, Mike Lee from Utah, clerk for Alito on the court. They could ask these questions that she's asking. They don't want to ask them. But by putting Rachel Mitchell, who is this attorney, in this position, she really can't cross-examine, because you need to have a courtroom to cross-examine, not this.
I think that, I don't know if I fully agree. I think she is making the headway lightly, because remember, the whole issue is whether or not she remembers what happened 35, 36 years ago. And if she's able to question some of the things around, i.e. whether it was 4 or 3, how many people were there, whether she was drinking, whether she wasn't drinking, it certainly can open the door to some questions of credibility. The issue becomes whether or not she's withstanding that cross-examination, and that's what I think she's doing very well.
At one point, she put up a map of the area where the country club was and where her home was, and she said, you said the party was within a mile of the country club, which meant that her home was some distance away, and she asked, so someone drove you home, right? And then she asked her, has anybody contacted you, and said, I was the person who drove you home. And Christine Ford said, no one's contacted her.
Right. And
does that make any difference?
What difference does it make if you know you were sexually assaulted? Does she know what color shoes she has on that night? Probably not. Does it make a difference? No. There are material facts and there are immaterial facts. And quite frankly, the trauma of the assault can then wipe out things that happened after the assault, running to home, talking to somebody. I mean, this was a 15-year-old girl. Let's remember that.
All right, here's another clip of Rachel Mitchell softly cross-examining Christine Ford. So why are her therapist notes of interest or importance?
Because the therapist notes can confirm, or they give her credibility by that's someone she told a while ago before this all came, and so if they're consistent with what she's saying now, they give her credibility. If there's some inconsistency, they lessen her credibility. But then again, we all have seen therapist notes, my own doctor's note. I had to get my doctor's note. She said, I didn't tell my doctor that. So, you have to use your common sense as to what's important and what she's correcting.
And she was asked, in those notes, is the name Brett Kavanaugh there? And she said, no, it is not.
Right.
Does that say something, do you think, or not?
Well, it depends on whether she was asked by the therapist who the person was. Was she asked, was it a person of power, or was the therapist just wanting to know whether she was assaulted? So we don't know. I mean, if you have a full investigation and she gives up her right to have the therapist privilege, it'd be nice to have the therapist question.
She was asked whether the notes were seen by a Washington Post reporter. If that's the case, has she waived the privilege if somebody outside the family has seen the notes?
Only for that specific person, not for everybody. Absolutely not.
It doesn't mean that she's lost the privilege.
No. You can waive a privilege for a specific individual, for a specific person, for a specific part. You're not waiving the entire privilege.
And remember, she corrected the record with Washington Post. Right. So it wasn't that she's first now indicating the inconsistencies. Right. She sees the notes and says, wait, let me just explain to you, just as you said, that's wrong. I don't remember it like that. So she clarified it before we even got to this stage.
If you had the Rachel Mitchell job and you had to cross-examine this seemingly credible witness, how would you do it? What's not being done that should be done?
Well, I tell you what. Well, first of all, I wouldn't take the job, but that's beside the point. But if I had to cross-examine her, I would say, look, you've been through this in your mind. There are things here that you can't remember. Why don't you list for me everything you can't remember that you think is important? Let's see if she does that. She may come back and say, nothing is important except the things I told her. But get her to say in lines, in paragraphs, things that may be inconsistent, not just piecemeal here and there.
How about yourself?
It's
you
hard.
Don't want the job, but if you had
I don't want the job, and I think the thing, and I don't want to be evasive by not answering you fully, but I think the problem I have, which is the problem that most of us have, is that this is a woman that's claiming to be the victim of a crime. And so it makes it incredibly difficult for a prosecutor to cross-examine a witness when they don't have the support of extrinsic evidence. And that's why it's so imperative that there be an investigation. Right. Because any time a witness comes to you as a prosecutor and says, I was raped, the first thing you do is say, or client, is there corroboration? Right. Can we find other witnesses?
And that's why her attorneys wanted the polygraph, by the way. They wanted to see, as a first step, was she telling the truth?
Was that a smart move?
Well, I've done it for people because I want them to commit to me that they're willing to put it down to a third person. Not necessarily for the truth of the polygraph, but just as a step.
I couldn't agree more. We were talking about this the other day. Remember, a polygraph, a lot of people don't trust it. Right. I think the bigger value is the fact that someone's willing to do it, because when you're willing to do it, it indicates that you're willing to take the chance that you wouldn't be found truthful, which indicates you're being truthful.
So she's under oath here. If she lies, it's a crime. And Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, praised her appearance at the end of this noon break. Very strong praise from a Democrat who obviously supports her story. If you're attorneys for Brett Kavanaugh, what is your strategy? Because he's going to appear this afternoon. He has said many times over, this just never happened.
Right. Right. Well,
what should he be doing?
Well, first of all, I'd go back over his record if I were him, but if I were the public, I'd go through his record. Is this the first time you're hearing of this? Yes. Are you horrified? Yes. Were you the person who committed this? No. Do you know who did? I have no idea. And I do believe an assault on her occurred, but it was not me. And that's what you can do. You don't want to denigrate her. You don't want to degrade her, as some people are doing. Some people I've seen have said, well, Blumenthal, he lied about his career, his Army career, military career, therefore she's lying. It's not the same thing.
He is locked into his story, though, right?
He is, and he's locked into several inconsistent stories because one time he doesn't drink, one time he drinks. And so we have a yearbook and we have plenty of other limited, but we have other information that indicates he's not being forthright. If he's not being forthright about that, you have to question what else he's not being forthright about, and then it comes to this case.
And that's what happens in a courtroom, but we're not in a courtroom, we're in a political arena.
The jury here is the 21 members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the larger jury, the entire Senate, which would have to vote on the nomination, and then the American public. How do you think it's playing?
Julie?
Look, I always say this, when I think of Clarence Thomas, I don't think about him as a Supreme Court judge. I have to be frank with you. I think about the soda. That's the thing I will always remember. And we have to be very careful, when we think about this, because is this what we want to remember with regards to who the next Supreme Court justice is going to be?
Very quickly, Brian, it doesn't end here even if it gets, confirmed.
How so?
Because if the Democrats take control in 2020, they can move to impeach him. They can move under Article 3 of the Constitution to remove him. They can move to pack the Supreme Court like Roosevelt did. We're in a new time, new remedies for people that feel they are aggrieved.
So this is far from over. And this hearing is far from over. The Senate is about to reconvene to continue the questioning of Christine Ford, and we'll cover it all here live on the Law and Crime Network. I'm Brian Ross. Good afternoon.